Hey, I'm Christopher Fields. I'm an NLP coach, and
Hi, I'm Ayó. I'm a trainer of NLP and also a transformation specialist.
today's topic is drug addiction and abuse. She's over in the UK, I'm in the US, so I guess there's a tiny bit of difference. And I guess before we get started, I did look up statistics for drug abuse in the US and the UK. And to be honest, it's so skewed, and statistics in general are so skewed that I couldn't come up with a number. But if I had to give a ballpark, between like 10 and 20% of individuals throughout each country that experience drug abuse. Now, it's important to understand these are only reportable. So how much is non-reportable? Probably double, maybe even triple, to be honest. So therefore, I don't think statistics are really important. For the most part, everyone can agree, a person or two people that have been addicted to, alcohol or some other kind of addictive substance throughout their lifetime. So I think it's extremely important topic to go over. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go over why people get addicted, why people stay addicted, and then what are solutions to fix that addiction. So I guess we'll start. In my opinion, I think that so there's a wide range of reasons why people become addicted. So that could be, in my experience, I know a lot of people due to their military history and Veterans Affairs, doping them up with medication and realizing, hey, I'm addicted now. There's, trauma, there's childhood issues. I think that for the most part, and even like with the military vet example, that happens also to civilians almost every single day. The doctor says, hey, try this, blah, 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 put it on you for like 2 to 3 months. And then, okay, now it's time to stop. And then people are just like, my brain can't stop because I'm addicted now. Fortunately, I think for the most part, opiate use or opiate prescriptions have dwindled down over the past few years due to a lot of lawsuits and arrests. But aside from that, it still definitely much so exists. If I had to guess, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, most of addiction, or the mindset of addiction, or the methodology of using drugs to combat mental health derives from the childhood. And this can be broken up. If I had to break it up into a few different parts, it would be, physical or sexual abuse, other trauma related issues throughout the childhood and teen years. And then probably the most important one, parental guidance. Now, and what I mean by parental guidance is specifically parents or guardians informing the child, hey, these are the right things in life, these are the wrong things. If you mess around with these things, it's dangerous, etc. I think that in too many cases throughout the United States, probably the UK is almost mirrored, is that parents don't put that extra time and energy to explain this to children and teens. Now, when you take that cocktail of issues and you add peer pressure, so you can take a child that's not well communicated to through parental guidance, and then they slip off, they find friends that, hey, well, we do these things to, boost our self-esteem, our happiness, etc. Then it's just a slippery slope after that. It's a snowball effect. And so when you add all these things together, it just, there's multiple different reasons as to how maybe a person becomes an addict. But once they're all combined, then you're in a dangerous territory. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. I think the parental influence is an interesting one because I think you can be a very, very astute parent. You can be the parent that says, stay away from drugs, drugs are bad, and give that guidance and give, your opinion about that, make sure that your child understands the dangers and, the consequences. But that child will still go and, or when they're a teenager, when they're in their experimental years, because of different factors that come into play, that teenager may still experiment. Whereas another set of circumstances, another child who had a parent that did exactly the same thing, that child or that teenager doesn't experiment. So it's interesting to look at, okay, so in those two sets of identical situations, what is the difference that makes that person whose parent said, stay away from it, and they stayed away from it, and what is the circumstance that makes the other child or teenager decide that they want to experiment? And there are loads of different factors that could be, influencing their decision to experiment. It's what teenagers do, but it's experimenting doesn't necessarily lead to addiction.
I agree, and I believe it. I believe experimenting is healthy, honestly. To experience the world, even marijuana, you can't be an advocate against like smoking marijuana without trying it. I believe. I don't think your voice is valid enough unless you actually do it. Now, that doesn't apply to everything. Murder would be a good one. Like, you can't try it out and then say, "Oh, it's not for me," and forbid it from everybody else. But I think, something as petty as that, and we can also see how society is changing in that aspect as well. Me personally, it's not, it's not my cup of tea. But I will point out something that you said, or maybe elaborate a bit, is that there's a difference between telling a kid, don't do this, don't do that, and then explaining why it is not for their best, interest. And there's a huge difference between those two things. And I know they kind of almost correlate, but in fact, they're very different, because there's a line from one of my favorite movies. I don't even know if I should admit this is a 35-year-old male, but Matilda is probably one of my favorite movies. And I remember something specifically about her father speaking to her in the movie is about, I'm old, you're young, I'm smart, you're stupid, etc. And unfortunately, a lot of parents take that same role. I'm the boss, you're the kid, do as I say, not as I do, etc. And the element of explaining is never, added into that bit. We have to remember, children, especially toddlers, children throughout their teen years and more, I'm 35, I'm still learning. They're trying to grasp, what is the world? How does the world operate? What are these things within the world? Blah, blah, blah. Tell me everything. I'm a sponge. I need to know. And when the parents, their first line of communication shuts that down and says, no, these are the rules, play by the rules. I'm not going to explain the rules to you or how they're going to affect you later, but you need to follow them anyways. The kids don't. With that being said, I'm going to take a quick pause, because I'm going to say, if in the middle of this conversation I raise my hand, it's not because I'm asking a question. It's because the blackness in my eyes are closing in. Because unfortunately, I think that I've gained too much weight, and this tie is cutting the blood off to my brain. That is, I know it sounds like a joke, but I think it's actually true. So I'm just going to loosen this up a bit. I definitely miscalculated.
Good idea.
Yeah, I miscalculated my attire today, but so we'll just do that. But what I would say,
I don't want you to lose consciousness.
It hurts. I feel so much better in 1 second. It just feels like so much choking. Yeah, I don't. But I'll say, with that being said, taking that specific philosophy of parents that are just, do as I say, and I'm not going to explain. There's also a lot of power, or I guess lack thereof, of saying, of forbidding something. Absolutely no, under any circumstance can you do this. If you do, you are in trouble. How do I word this? There's a lot of, you can create a lot of suggestion, especially in younger adults and children. If you open the playing field and say, kids, let's take a 15-year-old. Kids try marijuana. You have children, you have other teens at your school that are currently smoking marijuana on a daily basis. I'm not pointing marijuana out for any specific reason other than this scenario, but I found it very effective, and I've had deep, thorough conversations with multiple parents over the years, and I found that this tactic actually works better. But instead of saying absolutely not, if you do, you're in trouble, blah, 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 instead say, when that day comes, and it may, because it comes for a lot, come speak to me. I am your parent. I want to supervise. I want to make sure nothing goes wrong. Obviously, I care a lot about you. And if you have questions about marijuana, I want to answer them. I've been around the block. I have friends have done it, etc. They still do it. And so I have a lot more information than you, obviously. But if you just shut that gate and say, nope, and if you do, you're in trouble, it creates this adverse effect. Kind of like the Amish. Okay. I hate to point them out, but they have this, and don't quote me because to be honest, I'm not well versed on the Amish, but they have this period of time, I think, while you're in the Amish community, I think, once again, don't quote me, once the female, and I think male, or maybe only female, once they hit a certain age, are allowed to go off into the world. And what you can find is that when a lot of people see this freedom and taste a lot of different things, then they don't want to return back to, I don't even want to use this word because I don't want to be offensive, but like this kind of imprisoned lifestyle. So if you take the same method and apply it to parenting and say, I'm going to keep you in this box, and this is the box you're going to stay in until one day you're an adult, you'll find that once that box opens, it doesn't just open, it explodes. So you can be very strategic in the way that you introduce these angles of life to your child. And it has to, obviously be, you don't want to talk to a 3 or 4-year-old about drug use, not appropriate age. But I think once they're graduating through levels and you're the sole person or, pair or couple that has to teach this kid to be an adult, because you're not raising a child, you are raising an adult, and people get that mixed up a lot. So, yeah, I guess my point is anything that you suppress, hold down, or hold away from people, we can even use music in this instance. Oh, you can't listen to this type of music, it's bad for you. Well, the day that they're freed from you, that is the number one source of music they're going to. It's basic human psychology. And I think a lot of parents don't realize that. And in good faith, they think like this is a bad thing or a thing that I assume is bad. And this is my child and I care about my child. So I'm going to keep this thing away from this thing. And it just doesn't work out that easy, unfortunately. What are your thoughts on that?
I honestly couldn't agree with you more. And that's something that I've learned from you through our conversations is providing a protective environment within which your child can explore, but in the safety and with the protection and parental guidance. Because ultimately, I would say probably 90, I don't have exact statistics, but at a guess, I would say that, approximately like 90% of teenagers will experiment at some point in their lives with drugs, with alcohol. So I think it'd be silly not to provide a safe environment for them to do that. And I think that you becoming that safe person that they can talk to about things like that, I think it enhances the likelihood that that they'll trust you, they'll be more open with you, and they'll know that they can, count on you for guidance. And that can only build your bond and build your relationship with your child. So I can't, honestly can't see any negatives around that. But I think it takes a certain type of person with a certain level of communication to be able to do that. But I think it's worthwhile developing that level of communication with your child so that you can have those open types of conversation. And it doesn't only build your relationship with your child in that context, it also builds your relationship with your child in so many other contexts, in their trust and their belief in you, and knowing that they can lean on you, they can come to you with their problems and with their challenges. So I think it has multiple benefits. And I know you wanted to say something, so I'll stop there before you forget.
Well, yeah, you brought up a good point, and in other terms that people understand quickly is curiosity kills the cat. So same thing with drugs, music, etc. And we'll move on after this, actually, so we can get to the other pieces. But it's as if you're a parent and you put a box on top of your fridge and you point to your children and say, whatever you do, never open that box. Curiosity is going to get the best of them. Eventually, they're going to climb on the countertops. They're going to get to that box just to know what is in it. I've seen, matter of fact, I can give entire stories about how gun safety with children is exactly the same, and drug use with children is exactly the same. Once you become that person that they can go to and speak to, even experiment. I'll get to that in a second, but once you are that person, you remove so much curiosity from that child, and it's so powerful. So you obtain that thing as a parent that you wanted to initially obtain, but you did it the opposite way. So and another word that you said is protective. There's a huge problem being overprotective. Now, generally saying being a protective parent or overly protective parent is in good faith. Once again, I don't want my child to get hurt. After my decades of living on the planet, I know the things that can get my child hurt. And for the most part, that's correct. Now, for me, a specific example, like I have a teenage son. So when I was between 10 and 15, I got stitches like every 6 months. Just I was reckless, playing with my friends, and then I'm cut up, I'm banged up, and I have some horrible stories actually. And so when my child does things like that, that's what goes to my head. Like I don't want him to be in that position, But well, what is he going to lose by me being overprotected? He's going to lose the whole learning aspect of life, those hard, crucial bumps and bruised parts that sometimes you just got to bite on a bullet and let happen, Now, everything's good in moderation. I'm not going to let him, go play on the edge of a bridge, obviously. But, being rough around the edges, I think is absolutely important for teens. So when they are my age, they're a lot more conservative about the things that they do. So.
Mm-hmm. But before we move on from just this little aspect of it, I want your opinion about something, because there is an alternative way of getting children or young people to stay away from drugs. I've got a friend, and her, when she was, I don't know, probably between the ages of maybe 12 and 15, maybe younger in fact, one of her parents would drive her to an area where drug users, homeless people would hang out. And she would highlight and say, this is what happens to you if you do drugs. This is what your life is going to end up like. These are the consequences. And she's the same age as me. And to this day, she has never touched drugs. And she says it is primarily as a result of that experience and as a result of her parent taking her and showing her how her life, and I'm not saying that all drug users end up in that way. That's, it's important to make this distinction. But it was like the end of the spectrum of what could happen to you if that's the path you decide to go down. And it worked. I'm not saying that it would work for everyone, but I'm saying that there are different techniques. The one that we've just been speaking about is obviously a good one, but there are other ways of making sure that your people that you love don't fall prey to that temptation. So
yeah, that's a valid point, because I've noticed, like, through school systems, I can't really speak for the UK, but for the US, like, if we had the sex ed classes, they'll show videos of the female going through the delivery room with a child and just how this whole crazy process, etc. But with drug users, they don't, at least not to my knowledge, have, like, either immediate testimony or video testimony of people that just have gone off the rails due to, they were a teenager and they thought they were doing something harmless or just maybe experimental at the time, but how many times can you do something before it's not experimental anymore? It's a thing that you do. But to my knowledge, I don't know of that happening at all. And they have commercials all the time about smoking and how it can mess you up. And I've been messed up for music, but who's your audience? Put this in the school. And I know it's debatable for a lot of parents, of course, but you get firsthand testimony. This can screw you up if you do it this way. Don't. So I don't know. I think, especially with the United States, I think we lack a lot of things when it comes to education. And once again, stats are skewed. Every statistic is a skewed statistic, I believe. But generally speaking, yeah, of course we do. We teach irrelevant stuff in school. So, 25-year-old heroin addicts can recall their days of learning algebra, instead of the things that they probably should have learned. Because I think, not even just America, but the world as a whole, we put the wrong priorities first. So I guess moving on, we can look at, I guess we probably already went over the parental guidance, but there's abuse reasons and trauma-related reasons as to why a person would resort to this alternative happiness in a box. And I think, and we don't, there's too many, abuse or trauma-related issues to go over, so we can just generally speak. But I think, and I've thought about this a lot, and I've had a lot of deep conversations about it, I think the most important aspect of all of these things is that you take a person and their belief is that if I take this other thing, if I ingest this other thing into my body, cigarette, alcohol, drugs, that it's going to make me happier, temporarily happier. Bam. And I can do it again. I can do it again. I'm my current self. I'm unhappy. I take this thing and almost instantaneous, I'm happy now. And this is that algebraic formula that unfortunately is driven into a lot of people's minds. And why? Maybe it's pop culture. Maybe it's movies. It's definitely music. I can tell you that. But maybe they absolutely learned this from their own household that they grew up in, is that parent unhappy, parent takes this, now parent is happy. And this formula, unfortunately, it actually does make sense. And that's the worst part. But that doesn't mean it's healthy, and it doesn't mean it's going to steer you into the right direction in life. As a matter of fact, it's going to do quite the opposite. So I think that very specific formula, once again, I think that's the element that has to be dissected when we're talking about people that abuse drugs.
Agree. Couldn't agree with you more. It is addiction, I think, is an attempt to solve the problem of unhappiness. And I'd probably go even further and say it's to solve a problem of disconnection, either disconnection with yourself or feeling disconnected from other people. And as a result of that disconnection, that unhappiness. But I think it's looking at these root causes of this unhappiness. Where does it even stem from? Why is there such a problem with unhappiness why is there a problem in the first place that needs to be solved? Is it just part of the human experience that a lot of people are generally dissatisfied with life, unhappy with life? Because it's not just filled with the void doesn't just get filled with drugs, like you've spoken about. There's alcohol, cigarettes, porn, work addiction, gambling. There are so many different band-aids that people use to temporarily fill this void that they know is going to have negative consequences, but they still keep coming back to it time and time and time and time again, even though they're witnessing the negative experience, negative consequences in their lives, which is a really interesting kind of, almost another interesting algebraic formula, because it doesn't just bring happiness. There are also significant negative impacts on themselves, their family members, work, their surrounding environment, but still time and time again, they keep coming back to this thing.
Yeah, and I agree. So addiction is not just in this tiny hole of illegal substances or legal substances, which I think like are probably in some aspects worse than illegal. But so where I see this daily, I see this quote daily. I'm not productive until I've had my morning coffee. This is very generic and basic for people to say, but that is for people need to understand this. That is exactly the same mindset that algebraic formula I gave that drug addicts use. I am nothing until I take this thing. Coffee's the same. And trust me, I'm a very avid user of caffeine to probably the fullest. Probably got most people beat, to be quite honest. But it's the exact same concept. And I wanted to give that example because drug addicts are easy people to make fun of. They're, it's like easy bait for people that want to boost their self-esteem. That's a drug addict. They're laying on the sidewalk, look at them. They're pitiful. They have nothing because drugs ruin their life. And, that might be correct to an extent. They made bad choices, but they're so vulnerable. Why make fun of them? Instead, maybe help them. But, the majority of people aren't going to do that. But the point I want to make is you having your morning coffee is exactly the same mindset that drug addict had before they put that needle in their arm or, did whatever else. Maybe I got to be careful with what I say because I know like social media just take crap down, but it is really the same mindset. People just go overboard. People need replacement happiness more than others, due to their situations in life, maybe due to their childhood. There's a million different reasons. There's a million different ways you can cut it. And exactly, replacement, it is the replacement of happiness. And as a matter of fact, to come off of drugs, a lot of doctors will say, you need that, it's replacement therapy. You need to replace what you were doing that made you high or whatever with something else. Now, a lot of people, it's kind of a generic way to cure the unhappiness because I can tell you, not many people coming off drugs, their first thought in their head is, I want to go to the gym and work out, or I want to go on a 3-mile run. Now you have a lot of coaches or physicians, etc., say, oh yeah, just instead of doing drugs, go do it. And it also releases endorphins in your body or in your brain, etc., and it makes you happy. That's not reality though. There's nobody out there saying, you know what? I'm not going to smoke crack today. I'm actually just going to go on a 3-mile run. It's not reality. It sounds good in theory, but it's just not real. So I think replacement theory is, I think it works, but we have to mentally fix the issue first. Mm-hmm. What is the soul issue? Repetitive questions to dive down to why, how'd you get here? Why? What was the formula of things that happened to why you became where you are now? And you're hooked on a substance, which is an alternative happiness. And now once we understand that, then we can replace it with something else. So there's so much like vague, generic advice out there for drug addiction that it's almost sickening, to be honest, because it's easy for non-addicts to say, oh, just do this or just do that, or maybe you shouldn't have done that. It's easy to say it, hindsight. And I'm gonna use that same element when we get into the next thing, which is the criminal aspect. But it's easy to look back and say you should have done things differently. Of course, I'm sure they would agree with you. But we're here now. So how do you fix the problem?
Yes, and also the fixing the unhappiness part is important. It's also important to understand that a lot of people may not even understand the root cause of the problem. They don't even know the real reason, which is why, what you've mentioned about kind of drilling down to find that what's the real problem here? Why is the unhappiness there in the first place? Where does it come from? Where does it stem from? From working with a number of different people and research that I've done, I would say that primarily addiction, there's a strong connection between addiction and childhood trauma. So even though the person may be experiencing unhappiness in there now as an adult, it's highly likely that that unhappiness has actually rooted a very, very long time ago in their life. And it's about healing at that level. It's not just putting a band-aid on what they're experiencing now and the unhappiness that they're experiencing now. It's looking at uncovering the unconscious material and finding out where did the problem begin? What is the trauma that happened way back in the past? But the thing is that a lot of people who do take drugs are probably less inclined to do that introspection, that deep inner work, because perhaps just taking the drugs and hiding from that unhappiness is easier than doing that deep inner work. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to actually look inside of yourself, because that looking inside of yourself is also painful, because you'll find things there that you probably didn't even know existed. And you may not want to look at them because those are the shadows that a lot of people run away from and then use drugs to hide from those parts of themselves.
Yeah. I think we actually spoke on the phone about this last night when I was shoving pizza into my face, but the power of questioning. So we can take like with relationships. So why are you depressed and sad? Well, my wife left me. Well, why did your wife leave me? Well, she found someone else. Now a lot of people's answer stops right there. That's it. I'm a victim. My wife was cheating around. She left me. I'm unhappy. Everything's gone now. I'm a fresh start. But the power of questioning is, well, why did your wife cheat on you? Well, there was somebody better at her work. Why was somebody better at her work? Well, we weren't talking that much anymore. Well, why weren't you talking that much anymore? Well, we just grew apart. I started sleeping on the couch every night because well, why'd you start sleeping on the couch every night? Well, because I got home late every night because I was trying to make extra money for the family. I didn't want to wake her in the room. Okay, you see how you can come up with, instead of just the initial answer, which a lot of people will take it as face value, bam, that's the answer. But it's actually not. It's riddled all the way down into a lot deeper things. So I think, no, I don't think, I know, drug addicts are the same way. And it's unfortunate that a lot of non-drug users out there can just point the finger and say, you're in a bad position because you smoke crack. You're in a bad position, you do this or that. It's not that simple. It goes way deeper than that, unfortunately. And I think a very unfortunate thing is that drug addiction programs in general, probably for the most part, throughout the US, I can't speak for the UK, but they're probably the same once again, just hits that initial answer. They don't go deeper. And that's why most of it's unsuccessful. That's why most people relapse, because you don't dive down until what is the problem, So
I think it's a really interesting point that you're making, because when I knew that we were going to be talking about this topic, I was looking at some stuff online and came across this forum where people were speaking about their experience of why they became addicted in the first place, how they managed to actually get out of being addicted, how they've rehabilitated themselves. A lot of the points that we've touched on so far were coming up in the comments that people were leaving in this forum. And the one that kind of really stuck out to me was this guy. He wrote about his experience. He realized it was stemmed from childhood trauma. The majority of people that he's known for, he was a heroin addict, and the majority of people that he met on his journey, he was addicted to heroin for I think 10 years, had the same experience. It was because of something that happened in childhood. He said he had been in rehab 3 times, and it was only on the 3rd time being in rehab that he was actually successful, because they started to dig into the deep-rooted cause and identified that it was him. I think he was adopted at a young age, experienced significant trauma in the period of time when he was with his birth parents, and uncovered, they did, therapy and really dug down into the reasons. And I believe he's now been clean for 10 years. And that is solely as a result of actually doing that deep inner work and digging into the reasons and doing the therapy, doing the hard work. And the times before he'd been in rehab, they didn't really touch on those things. So didn't give him an opportunity to heal and then work towards being free from his addiction.
Yeah, there's I know this probably sounds cliche to an extent, but there's a lot of power in knowing exactly what the problem is. And because then it creates like more of a tangible vibe. So once you can identify it, then you say, I'm slowly getting away from that. And maybe to put it into like different term is that me specifically, I keep a few lists on by my side throughout the day. My memory is not that great, so I keep a list. And even some of the most petty things, like just remember to fold your clothes. Of course, I'm going to fold my clothes after I wash them. Otherwise, they're just going to sit there. But if I put something as simple as fold your clothes, and then once I fold them, I can mark it off the list, it feels like an accomplishment because I identified exactly a thing and I scratched it off. So I'm taking a step above, where I was 10, 15 minutes ago. I made it a tangible, visible thing. So yeah, I agree with that. The root cause of the problem is extremely powerful, and once you identify it, because then you can get away from it. So, so we have about 19 minutes left.
Okay. What else did you want to touch on?
Definitely
what bits?
Definitely the criminal.
Okay. Go for it.
The criminal and rehabilitation part. Mm-hmm. So I happen to know a lot about this. And I think that
why do you know a lot about it?
Well, that's, my initial career field is criminal justice and degrees and all that cool stuff. But I took a lot of time to learn, how are criminals made? What causes them to do criminal activity? And then what causes them to reoffend? And there's no good answer for it, unfortunately, because each person is a bit different, of course. But I will say, speaking of government and how they go to fight, let's say the drug war, okay? 10, 15 years ago, my view on the war on drugs was a lot different because it seems like an easy concept. Person does drugs, that's a bad thing. Let's put them in jail. Let's put the drug dealer in jail. But at the end of the day, it actually doesn't change anything at all. And we can see that with numbers. Matter of fact, it looks like it's skyrocketing. And it's a very simple business rule. Over the years, I keep diving into this because it always comes up in conversation. There's a simple, easy business rule as to why the war on drugs does not work. And it's supply and demand. So law enforcement, they talk about prevention a lot. There's actually no prevention. Or maybe there is, it just doesn't work. But it's because they always attack the problem, the issue, the drug issue, retroactively. So a person does a thing, now we're going to punish the person. And it never works out that way because maybe, here's an idea, maybe if you prevent why the person wants to do the drugs or purchase the drugs or sell the drugs in the first place, then you can take the whole demand part out. And if you take the demand away from the supply, then the supply goes away. So we can talk about the drug cartels, etc. But guess what? If nobody's buying drugs and they don't need them, then there's no reason for a supply. So we're always, my point, and parents do this too. This is the problem. Parents that do the same exact thing law enforcement does. I'm going to attack it at the end. I'm going to punish the end result. I'm going to punish the user or the seller, etc. And they're going to go to jail, or they're going to have probation, or they're going to pay all this money for blah, 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 which in return you get 0% of rehabilitation for your drug problem. We're going to attack that because that is a bad thing. And it's almost like dumbed down Barney style. And that is exactly why it doesn't work, because maybe if we used our brains a bit, we would go back to the initial cause. Well, why is a person doing drugs anyways? Maybe we can have more classes, more mental health classes for one, and that that blows up into a lot of other areas as well. But mental health classes, maybe we can have drug abuse classes, etc. More and more and more, and maybe single people out, have specific conversations with them, specific classes, specific courses, etc. But we're not. We're waiting. We're waiting until they take the bait, and then punishment, and then they pay some money, and that helps no addict in the world. And guess what? It happens again. This is why typically when drug users go to jail, it's not their last time. They'll be back because the government did absolutely nothing. Now, I'm not putting the responsibility on the government for drug addicts, but I'm just saying that if you're going to punish them, which I don't really, to be honest, my mindset has changed a lot on victimless crimes, kind of like a seatbelt. Oh, you have to wear a seatbelt or you're going to get a ticket. We're going to pull you over and get a ticket. But who am I hurting if I don't wear a seatbelt? I'm hurting no one but potentially me. And statistically, it's going to be very low. So I don't believe in things like seatbelt laws, but it's the same concept with drugs. I'm affecting me. Now that is open for conversation. A lot of people will disagree with me, and I already know what the argument is, and I already see their points. But I'm saying what we're doing now, which would be their argument, doesn't work. So sorry, I have a leg up on that argument. But all we have to simply do is go back. Where's it coming from? What's the original source? And just like we were talking a second ago about the question game, riddle it all the way down. Supply and demand. Unfortunately, there's a lot of demand for drugs right now for a lot of different reasons, most of which we spoke about. But if there's a demand, there will be a supply. And trust me, the U.S. government knows nothing better than to create this supply and demand on worst case scenario and best case scenario, unfortunately. So I don't know. I think we look at it incorrectly. I think we handle it incorrectly. And I think that is why we keep getting the same exact results, and rehab is unsuccessful the majority of the time.
So does that lead to the question about whether or not the people in power actually want the problem to disappear? I don't know whether that leads us into a territory that we don't necessarily want to get into today, but I think it's an important question to pose. Is it actually a problem that people in positions of power want to be free from? Because there are many benefits in some aspects to this problem being a problem. We can sidestep it if you want to, but
I don't want to get in conspiratorial land. Okay, and we don't have enough time for this conversation. I will say there's a quote. I can't remember the exact words, but something like, if the product or service is free, you're the customer, or you are the product, or something like that. And the government knows that. The government is very smart. We are riddled into this business scheme of theirs, of course. And maybe not consciously, maybe not. Maybe that's just how the program's designed. I don't know. We do know not much is helping. Or on any forefront, especially drugs or the drug abuse in the United States. Once again, I can't speak for your country, but probably relatively the same.
I don't think it's as bad as in America, because I think the prescription drugs. That's not true. I don't know. I'm just thinking maybe because of the prescription drugs that are available in the US.
But your prescription drug abuse rate is actually higher than the US.
Oh, really?
I do know that. Yeah.
Okay.
I was surprised when I found
corrected.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that either until I looked it up, and I was like, oh, wow. That's
the same sorts of drugs that you have, like the Percocet and those sorts of things. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you
go on.
Well, you brought this up earlier, but I thought you were about to mention it, but you didn't. But
I think I was, but carry on.
Okay. The decriminalization of drugs. Yes. Is it helpful? I'll start off. I'll say I want to say I'm bent on it, but if I had to, place a bet right now, I would say yes, it would be better to decriminalize, because my whole philosophy is the addict doesn't exist. They don't grow on trees. There's root causes to drug abuse. Okay, drug users, drug abuse. So whether or not they're legal or not, cigarettes are legal, but a lot of people say, not for me, not for me. So we can use that same formula, and then also once again, we go back to, it's a victimless crime. They're hurting nobody but themselves, etc. Also, with criminalization of drugs, you create that supply. Now you create a lot of altered, or AKA fake drugs, to come into the United States or are manufactured throughout the states, which cause an influx in, I'm not sure to say, drug overdose. So there's a lot of different pieces that it affects by being a crime. Now, I think there's a few states, or maybe just one, that has decriminalized drugs. And to be honest, I don't know the success or fail rate off of it. It's face value. The question's like, of course it should be illegal. But when you really dive into it, it's like, well, has it been helping, or has it really just been ripping families apart? Has it created all these side issues, by being criminalized? And I can tell you right now, many police officers, especially in Atlanta, Georgia, they don't believe in throwing somebody in jail for possession of marijuana, something so petty that, like, once again, society's changing toward. They don't believe in that crap. It's like a waste of their time, really. And that's a valid point. Is it a waste of time? Is this whole war on drugs a waste of time? Like I said, if I had to place it better, I would say yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we're also, by focusing so much attention on that, we're taking attention away from the real problem. Why are people doing it anyways? Why are people persuaded into, this is where I fix my happiness, drugs? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of angles there. I think there's good arguments on both sides, of course, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the decriminalization angle is pretty interesting, because I mentioned this to you earlier about Portugal has decriminalized the personal possession of drugs since 2001. And they've noticed since then a steady decline in drug-related deaths, drug-related crimes, obviously drug-related incarceration, and an increase in people going into rehab and actually recovering from drug addiction. I guess they may be providing, more substantial rehab facilities and more substantial rehab care, but the crimes and the drug-related deaths and things that were bad about society have all seen a steady decrease. So that Portugal being an example, I'm curious. We don't have the answers today, but it just makes me curious as to why there aren't more people following this, which looks like a formula that's working for them. So I'm confused about why there isn't more of that being sort of either experimented with or implemented, and then for us to see the positive results of that. So
yeah, for starters, it's a widely known fact that there are more drugs in jails than outside of jails. So if the punishment is to go to jail where there are more drugs, who are you helping? Who are you helping? And the answer is nobody, because it's a business. At the end of the day, there's a lot of aspects to the criminal justice world where it's a business. It's where revenue comes. And and to give a very hypothetical, speeding tickets, if nobody in the United States starting tomorrow ever went 1 mile over the speed limit, you know how much money that all these small municipalities and county governments would lose? Billions. Billions of dollars. You think they actually want you to stop speeding? That's a lie. That's an absolute lie. But society is always changing, of course. We don't know whether to be for the best or worse. We can only, have conversations like this where we explore. Honestly, we have about 5 minutes left, but this could be like a 3-hour talk because there's so many elements to it. And I don't think we get there, without real conversations. And I know that's a very cliche term. Oh, we got to have real conversations about it. And then really it's just two people arguing and not having a, actually civil course of speaking with each other. But there's also one other part. I think my mind escapes me right now, but
one other thing that I wanted to touch on just quickly. You mentioned about it being a victimless crime. I'm not 100% sure that I agree with that. It's not only the individual that's harming themselves when they take drugs, because you've got to think about, the victims who, when people are addicted to drugs, things like heroin, you see an increase in crime, increase in, homes being burgled, cars being stolen, and shops, being people stealing from shops to get money to buy the drugs. So I think that there are victims. I don't think that anybody is being hurt. And maybe this is the thing that you meant. Nobody is directly being hurt by them taking the drugs. But then there are families that are torn apart by it. There are children that lose their parents as a result of taking drugs. So I don't think it is a victimless crime for those reasons.
That's debatable. There's always the spin-off of anything. And there's a lot of people that burglarize houses and tear their families apart with zero drugs. And there's a course of action for those things. There are, unfortunately, incompetent government offices that specifically handle child cases like that. There are, burglary is still burglary. They're still going to jail. Robbery is still robbery. And I think that if it was maybe decriminalized and more adequately handled, then those things may not take place. Now, I have no idea. It's hard to speak into the future, but I do know that already takes place. And the way we're, attacking it right now doesn't work. I know that. If you throw a heroin addict, let's say, I need money to buy my drugs. Let me rip somebody's side AC thing out of their window and go pawn it and blah, blah, blah. And then guess what? They quick, easy arrest. They go to jail. They come out. What changed? Nothing. It's going to happen again. You can almost bet, everything on it. It's going to happen again. So I know that the way we do it now doesn't work. I would actually even love to get into a deep conversation with someone that has like more criminal expertise. Of course you don't, because there's a lot of points to argue there. But I guess the sole purpose of this conversation is to talk about the addict brain. And I think, and that's where it stems from. What causes it to be there, how to fix it, So I think if we focus our attention, we focus our energy back to the root cause, childhood, which means parents need to be a lot more responsible of the way they conduct themselves. And I know that's a slippery slope there. I know that's a arguable point because people have their freedom. So if you're not going to tell me what kind of parent to be, and I don't have a great answer for where is that line you cut. I don't have a great answer for that, but I know that those answers do stem from conversations like this. So.
Okay. So I reckon we're almost at time. So have you got any final statements that you want to share before we? I know you've just kind of said, root cause parenting. Is there anything else before we round up for the day?
I think it's important for non-addicts to try to understand the mentality of addicts, even if they don't touch or don't plan on touching drugs. Okay, for a few reasons. For one, it's just generally good to understand other types of people's view of the world, or at least their current situation, current reality. It makes us all just work a little bit better, like a well-oiled machine. Secondly, can you positively say you'll never be an addict? It might be easy to say, but it might happen. You don't know. You don't know what curveball life is going to throw you tomorrow. You can only speak for today. Furthermore, are you going to have a family member or close friend that experiences this? Wouldn't it be better if maybe you've put a lot of research and thought into those, the mentality, mindset of addicts, so you can help them? And of course you want to help them, right? Or are you just going to point and say, shouldn't have done that? Because that helps nobody, I think that's my answer. Just the power of questioning. Just question it all the way down to the bottom piece. Everything, not just this, subject, but everything. I think that would be my final.
Okay. And my final would just be I guess the focus really is about the root cause of why it's a problem in the first place. And I guess the understanding that more attention that's paid on, rehabilitation and recovery when it comes to actually providing therapy or coaching or, transformation work to help people to overcome these root causes of the problems, I think is going to be, I don't think we'll ever, get rid of it completely, but I think that would work towards helping more people overcome addiction than the replacement therapies, or that, are probably more prevalent. So, but it's been a good conversation.
Yeah, like I said, I could have went longer, of course, but 1 hour is good enough for me. So
yeah, absolutely.
We'll follow back up on this, I'm sure, because this will weave into some other conversations we have about relationships with families and romantic relationships as well. But anyhow, it's going to conclude for today. I'm going to put all these cool links into the bottom part of this. To be honest, I'm not much tech related, or I'm not that tech savvy, so we'll see what kind of links are there and what kind are not there, but I'm going to try.
Thanks for watching.
Yep, until next time.